May 3rd, 1943. 14:30 hours. Camp Hereford, Texas. Sergeant Marco Bellini stands naked in a concrete room that smells of chlorine and soap. 23 other men stand with him, equally naked, equally silent. The tiles are white, clinical. The showerheads, 12 of them, mounted in 2 rows along the ceiling, gleam chrome in fluorescent light. An American corporal demonstrates the controls. Hot water on the left, cold on the right. Soap dispensers mounted on the walls. Towels stacked on benches by the door. 15 minutes, the corporal says through an interpreter. Clean yourselves properly. Medical inspection follows. The door closes. Locks from outside. Bellini's hand hovers over the hot water valve. He doesn't turn it. Neither does anyone else. They stand there, breathing shallow, smelling their own bodies. The accumulated reek of 3 weeks in a Liberty ship hold, 6 months in North Africa, a year and a half of war that reduced hygiene to a canteen cup and a dirty rag. Someone whispers, "Gas." The word spreads, travels through 24 naked men in 3 seconds flat. Because they've heard stories, rumours from the Eastern Front, whispered intelligence about camps in Poland, and now they're locked in a sealed room with pipes and valves and a door that only opens from outside. Bellini was a plumber in Napoli before the war. He understands water systems, pressure, temperature, the mechanics of infrastructure. He knows these are showerheads. But knowledge and belief aren't the same thing when you're naked and locked in, and your captors speak a language you barely understand. He reaches for the valve. His hand shakes. This is the moment. Not the surrender in Tunisia, not the Atlantic crossing. Here, now, when basic human maintenance becomes an act of faith. Marco Bellini was born in 1917 in Napoli's Quartieri Spagnoli, the Spanish quarters, where buildings lean together across streets so narrow that laundry lines connect third-story windows and sunlight only reaches the cobblestones for 2 hours a day. His father owned a plumbing business. Not successful, barely surviving. But honest work, and in the quartieri that counted for something. Marco learned the trade from age 12. Crawling through crawl spaces, snaking drains, replacing corroded pipes in buildings older than America. He loved the logic of it. Water wants to flow downhill. Pressure seeks equilibrium. Fix the system right, and it works forever. Fix it wrong, and you flood 3 apartments and ruin someone's wedding. By 1940, he was 23, engaged to a girl named Sofia, who worked in her family's cafe, and installing a new water heater in a building on Via Toledo when Mussolini declared war on France. The conscription notice arrived 3 weeks later. He reported to the 192nd Armoured Division Ariete, the RAM, trained on L-335 tankettes, which were less tank and more armoured coffin with a machine gun. Deployed to Libya in January 1941. He'd never left Napoli before, never seen desert, never imagined heat that turned metal too hot to touch or cold that froze canteen water solid. The thing he remembers most from North Africa isn't the fighting, it's the thirst. The way water dominated every thought, every calculation, every moment. British artillery was terrifying. German officers were brutal, but thirst was constant. His unit's water ration, 1 litre per day, for drinking, cooking and washing, in temperatures that reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit. You learn to prioritize. Drinking first, always. Washing became theoretical. Shaving stopped entirely. Men went weeks without bathing. Months. You wiped yourself down with a wet rag if you were lucky, sand if you weren't. Bellini developed a technique. He'd pour a 1/4 litre into his helmet, add a pinch of soap shaved from a bar he'd carried from Italy, and wash his face, neck and hands. The same water, reused, for his feet at night. Every 3 days, if water allowed. Most men didn't bother. They smelled like corpses long before they became them. The strategic situation in North Africa by spring 1943 was terminal. Rommel had withdrawn to Tunisia. The Afrika Korps was surrounded. British 8th Army from the east, American and Free French forces from the west. Supply lines across the Mediterranean were being devastated by Allied air and naval power. Fuel was scarce. Ammunition scarcer. Water critical. The Ariete Division had been decimated at El Alamein in November 1942. Bellini's unit, what remained of it, retreated across Libya, then Tunisia. By April 1943, they were dug in near Enfidaville, holding a position they couldn't supply and couldn't abandon. The water situation had become catastrophic. Official rations dropped to half a litre per day. Actual delivery was sporadic. Men drank from shell craters, radiator water, anything liquid. Hygiene ceased to exist as a concept. Men had dysentery, cholera, typhus, skin diseases from dirt and lice. Infections that turned minor wounds gangrenous. The division's medical officer, a doctor from Milano named Rossini, reported that 40% of casualties were disease-related, not combat. But the Wehrmacht doctrine, inherited by the Italians, was clear. Water for fighting. Everything else was weakness. Decadence. The soldier must harden himself against physical discomfort. This wasn't ideology. It was mathematics. There wasn't enough water for both drinking and washing. The choice was simple. Except the choice was killing them. Slowly. In ways that didn't show up in after-action reports. By May 1943, Bellini had gone 4 months without a proper wash. His uniform was stiff with salt and dirt and blood. Some his, mostly others. His skin was grey. His hair was matted. He smelled like something that should be buried. They all did. The entire unit. An army of ambulatory corpses, fighting and dying and rotting simultaneously. When the surrender came, May 13th near Tunis, Bellini felt relief. Not shame, not defeat, just relief that the thirst would end. He didn't know about the showers yet. The American processing system moved with industrial efficiency. Capture, disarmament, documentation, medical screening, delousing, transport. Bellini and 2,147 other Italian POWs were loaded onto trucks, driven to Bizerte, then onto Liberty ships for the Atlantic crossing. The holds were crowded, men packed shoulder to shoulder on bunks stacked 4 high. But there was food, water, not abundant, but adequate. The crossing took 18 days. They landed at Norfolk, Virginia. Processed again. Then trains, real passenger trains, not freight cars, across the American South to Texas. Bellini watched through windows, saw cities intact, bridges standing, farmland cultivated, no bomb craters, no burned vehicles, no refugees, just normalcy, abundance, fields of wheat and cotton stretching to horizons unmarked by war. They arrived at Camp Hereford on May 3rd. The camp was new, built in 1942 specifically for Axis POWs. Neat rows of wooden barracks, watchtowers, chain-link fencing topped with barbed wire. But the barracks had screens on the windows. The latrines had plumbing. There was electricity. The American camp commander, Colonel William Patterson, a National Guard officer from Oklahoma who'd never seen combat, addressed them through an interpreter. You will be treated according to Geneva Convention standards. You will receive adequate food, water, shelter, and medical care. You will work, agricultural labor mostly. You will not be abused. Any guard who mistreats a prisoner will face court-martial. Do you understand? The interpreter translated. The men stood silent. None of them believed it. Geneva Convention protections were theoretical. Paper documents. They'd seen what happened to prisoners on the Eastern Front, heard the stories. But then Patterson said something that made Bellini's chest tighten. First, you'll shower and receive clean clothing. Follow the guards. Shower. The word in Italian was doxia. The interpreter used it clearly. They were marched to a long concrete building divided into shower rooms. 24 men per room. The guards were young, teenagers mostly, who looked bored rather than hostile. One was chewing gum, another was reading a comic book. They stripped, piled their uniforms, lice-infested, rank, disintegrating, in a corner. stood naked while an American medic did a quick visual inspection for wounds or obvious disease. Then they were herded into the shower room. The door closed. Locked. That's when the panic started. Because this was how you do it. If you were going to gas prisoners, this was exactly how. Strip them. Lock them in a sealed room. Tell them it's for cleaning. They'd believe it until the gas started flowing, and by then it would be too late. Bellini looks at the showerheads. Chrome, industrial, efficient. His training as a plumber tells him these are standard commercial fixtures. Model number stamped on the valve housing. Kohler K72. American manufacture. Flow rate, 2.5 gallons per minute. Pressure regulation, 60 psi. These are showers, just showers. But his hindbrain, the part evolved to detect danger, to survive, screams, trap, trick, death. He reaches for the hot water valve. His fingers touch chrome. Behind him, someone prays, quietly, in Sicilian dialect. Santa Maria, Madre di Dio. Bellini turns the valve. Hot water erupts from 12 showerheads simultaneously. The water is hot. Actually hot, not lukewarm, not tepid. Hot enough to steam in the cool air. Bellini stands directly under a showerhead. Water hits his scalp, runs down his face, his chest, his legs. It's clean, pressurized, unlimited. He's been dirty for so long that he's forgotten what clean feels like. The sensation is overwhelming, physical, almost violent. 4 months of accumulated filth begins to dissolve, runs down his body in grey-brown streams, circles the drain. He reaches for the soap dispenser, presses. A handful of white soap, actual soap. Not the ersatz olive oil cakes the Italian army issued, fills his palm. It smells like nothing, clean nothing, American industrial nothing. He lathers. His hands move automatically, plumber's hands, used to working by feel. He washes his hair first, feels the mat of dirt and oil begin to break apart. The water turns brown, then grey. Then finally, slowly, clear. Around him, other men are doing the same. Slowly at first, tentatively, then faster, desperately, scrubbing years of war off their bodies with American soap and American water pressure and American chrome fixtures that work exactly as designed. No one speaks. The only sound is water. 12 showerheads at 2.5 gallons per minute equals 30 gallons per minute equals 1,800 gallons over 15 minutes. More water than Bellini's entire unit consumed in a week in North Africa. For washing. Just for washing. The math breaks something in his head. He stands under the spray, eyes closed, and feels his body remembering what it's like to be human. Not a military asset. Not a tactical unit. Human. A mammal that requires maintenance. Then he hears someone crying, sobbing. The sound is raw, primal. He opens his eyes, looks around, can't tell who it is. The steam is too thick, but the crying spreads. 1 man, then 3, then 7. They're crying under hot showers in Texas, naked, broken. Not by cruelty, but by kindness. By the sudden restoration of something so basic they'd forgotten it was missing. Bellini feels his own throat tighten. His eyes burn. Not from soap, from something deeper. The relief of being clean. The humiliation of realizing how dirty you'd become. The rage at a war that made filth normal and hygiene a luxury. He doesn't cry, but he wants to. The 15 minutes end. The door opens. An American corporal, different one, black, maybe 30, tosses in towels. Dry off. Clean uniforms waiting outside. Move it along. The corporal's tone is bored. Routine. This is just Tuesday for him. Process prisoners. Issue clothing. Move to the next batch. For the prisoners, it's resurrection. For the guard, it's overtime. That disparity, that gulf between their experience and his routine, is what finally makes Bellini understand. This isn't special treatment. This isn't propaganda. This is just standard. How America processes prisoners. with hot water and soap and bored corporals who want to finish their shift. They dry off, file out into a hallway that smells like bleach and fresh paint. Tables are set up. American enlisted men, privates, corporals, none older than 22, stand behind them with stacks of clothing. Size? A private asks. He's from somewhere in the Midwest. Iowa, maybe. Wisconsin. He has acne. Bellini doesn't understand. The interpreter translates. Your clothing size? I don't know. Medium. In Italian sizes, the private eyeballs him. Medium shirt, 32 waist. Next. He's handed one blue denim shirt with PW stenciled on the back. One pair of blue denim pants, also marked PW. One belt. 2 pairs of socks, actual socks, not the rotted things he'd been wearing. 1 pair of work boots, broken in but serviceable. 1 set of underwear. Everything is clean. Everything fits. Everything is new enough that it doesn't smell like the previous owner. A corporal demonstrates. Shirts and pants get exchanged for clean ones every week. Socks and underwear twice a week. You keep the boots unless they wear out. Any questions? The interpreter translates. The prisoners stand silent. Weekly laundry. For prisoners. Provided by the enemy. As if this were normal. Bellini dresses in clothing that doesn't smell like death. The fabric is rough, standard issue denim, manufactured by the millions. But it's clean. He can smell the detergent. Something industrial, efficient, American. He looks down at himself. Blue denim. PW, marked clearly visible. He looks like a prisoner, but he smells like soap. That's when he starts to believe it might be real. Camp Hereford held Italian and German POWs in separate compounds. The Germans arrived first, Afrika Korps veterans, captured during the same Tunisia offensive. They'd been processed through the same system, same showers, same clothing issue, same bored American efficiency. Excerpt from Camp Hereford Intelligence Report, 15 May 1943. German officer POWs display marked hostility toward Italian POWs. Hauptmann Ernst Schaefer, captured Tunis, 12th May 43, made several disparaging comments about Italian softness and lack of martial spirit during processing. Notable exchange during mess hall incident, 14th May 43. Italian POW complained about quality of bread issued. German POW shouted, "You cry about bread? You're being fed better than the Führer's SS. Show gratitude." Assessment. German POWs appear more ideologically committed. Italians appear more pragmatic, less hostile to captivity. Recommend separating compounds further to prevent conflict. But here's what the American intelligence officers missed. The Germans weren't more committed. They were more afraid. Hauptmann Kurt Brenner, former company commander in the 21st Panzer Division, wrote in a letter home, intercepted by censors, translated, never delivered. Liebste Anna, the Americans treat us correctly, better than correctly. They follow Geneva Convention protocols with bureaucratic precision. Hot showers, clean clothing, medical care, food in abundance. But this is the trap. They make you comfortable. They restore your humanity. And then you remember, you have lost. You are a prisoner. Your nation is being destroyed. And you are clean, fed, safe. The Italians weep over hot water. We do not weep, but we think the same thoughts. What kind of enemy feeds you 3 meals and washes your clothing? What kind of power is this, that they can afford to treat prisoners humanely? I fear we have fought the wrong war, or fought it the wrong way, or both. The letter was filed with hundreds of others, evidence of morale degradation among POW population. But it wasn't morale degradation, it was cognitive dissonance. The collision between propaganda, Americans are weak, decadent, racially inferior, and reality, Americans have hot water and don't need to be cruel. The routine establishes itself. Wake at 0600. Breakfast, grits, eggs, bacon, coffee. Work detail from 0800 to 1200. Cotton picking mostly, in the massive Texas fields that stretch beyond the horizon. Lunch, rest period. More work from 1500 to 1800. Dinner, free time. Lights out at 2200. Every Sunday, laundry exchange. You bring your dirty clothing. Receive clean. The Americans operate an industrial laundry facility on site. Massive machines that process hundreds of pounds of clothing daily. Bellini watches the American enlisted men who run the laundry. They're bored, smoking cigarettes, joking around, treating this like any other job, which for them it is. But for the prisoners, it's miracle. Weekly clean clothing, provided by the enemy, without cost, without degradation. The shower schedule is twice weekly, Monday and Thursday, 15 minutes, hot water every time. Some men still cry, not as many, but some, usually the older ones, the veterans who fought in Ethiopia, Spain, North Africa, men who've forgotten what maintenance feels like. Bellini stops crying after the third week, not because it stops affecting him, but because it starts feeling normal, expected, the routine of being maintained. That's worse somehow. The adaptation, the way the body forgets deprivation once it's removed. One evening, sitting on his bunk after a shower, he touches his face. He's clean-shaven. The camp issued razors, supervised shaving twice weekly in the latrine. His skin feels smooth, almost unfamiliar. His bunkmate, Corporal Giacomo Rossi, former infantryman from Torino, says, "You know what bothers me?" "What?" "I'm cleaner now than I was in civilian life. My mother's apartment didn't have hot water. We heated it on the stove, one bucket at a time, for Saturday baths." Bellini nods. Same in the Quartieri Spagnoli. Hot water was a luxury. Most families bathed once a week, sometimes less in winter when fuel was expensive. "So I'm a prisoner," Rossi continues. "In enemy hands, 8,000 kilometers from home. And I have better hygiene than I had in peacetime. What does that mean?" Bellini has no answer. Neither does history. Dr. Harold Morrison, camp medical officer, kept detailed records. They survive in the National Archives. June 1943. Medical summary, Camp Hereford. Initial medical screening of Italian POW population, 2,847 individuals, revealed 94% presenting with dermatological conditions, fungal infections, lice, scabies, chronic ulceration, 67% presenting with dental decay requiring intervention, 43% presenting with gastrointestinal parasites, 31% presenting with signs of chronic malnutrition, 23% presenting with respiratory infections, treatment protocol implemented, mandatory delousing upon arrival, DDT application, twice weekly shower schedule with supervised hygiene instruction, dental clinic established, rotation of civilian dentists from Amarillo, anti-parasitic treatment, Atabrine protocol, graduated refeeding program for malnourished individuals, tuberculosis screening, 12 active cases identified, isolated, treated, results after 90 days, dermatological conditions, 94% reduced to 8%, dental emergencies, reduced by 76%, parasitic infections, reduced by 89%, average weight gain, 18 pounds per individual, respiratory infections, reduced by 81%. Conclusion, basic hygiene and adequate nutrition produce dramatic health improvements in previously neglected population. Findings suggest frontline hygiene conditions in Italian army were severely substandard. Substandard. That was the medical term, clinical, neutral. The prisoners had a different word, survival. You survived. You didn't maintain. Maintenance was a peacetime luxury. Except America was at war, and they maintained anyway, because they could afford to. In August 1943, the camp implemented a letter program. Prisoners could send one letter per month, maximum 100 words, subject to censorship. Letters went through the Red Cross, neutral routes, eventually reaching Italy. Eventually. Maybe. The Italian postal system was collapsing under Allied bombing. Most letters never arrived. Bellini wrote to Sophia, "My dearest Sophia, I am a prisoner in Texas. I am safe. I am healthy. The Americans treat us correctly. We have food, water, shelter. I work in cotton fields. The land is flat like the sea. I think of you every day. I shower with hot water twice weekly. I have clean clothing. My skin is clean. My stomach is full. I am ashamed that this is the best I have lived since the war began. Wait for me. I will return. Marco. He handed the letter to the American censor, a lieutenant from Massachusetts who spoke Italian and looked uncomfortable reading prisoners' private correspondence. The lieutenant read it. Paused at the line about shame, made no mark, approved it. Your fiancée? The lieutenant asked. Yes, sir. She's lucky. You'll go home eventually. This war can't last forever. Bellini wanted to ask, which side are you trying to comfort? But he didn't, just nodded. Took his censored letter, stamped passed, and dropped it in the mailbox. Sofia never received it. Napoli was bombed heavily in August 1943. Her family's cafe was destroyed. She and her mother evacuated to relatives in Salerno. The letter arrived at a burned building, was marked undeliverable, was filed in a dead letter office that was itself destroyed 6 weeks later. But Bellini didn't know that. He kept writing. 1 letter per month. September. I am healthy. The weather is hot. I miss you. October. The harvest is finished. We rest more now. I pray for your safety. November. I think of our wedding, of the life we will build. Hold faith. None of them arrived. All of them were filed, archived, preserved. Evidence of a man trying to maintain connection across an unbridgeable gulf. The news arrived by radio. Italy had surrendered. Signed an armistice with the Allies. Marshal Badoglio had overthrown Mussolini, formed a new government, and capitulated. The prisoners were assembled in the recreation yard. Colonel Patterson addressed them. Italy has signed an armistice with Allied forces. You are no longer enemy combatants. You are co-belligerents. Technically, the legal status is complicated, but this means you're not going home yet, but the war is over for you. You're safe. The interpreter translated. The prisoners stood silent. Then someone started laughing, hysterical, uncontrolled. The laughter spread. Not joy, not relief. Something darker. The laughter of men who've lost everything and gained nothing except the certainty that their loss is permanent. Because they understood. Italy had surrendered, which meant the Germans would occupy it, which meant their families were now enemy civilians in German-held territory, which meant they were safer here in Texas than their families were in Italy. That night, Bellini sat on his bunk and tried to calculate. Sofia was in Napoli. Napoli would be occupied, either German or Allied, depending on who got there first. Either way, there would be fighting, bombing, starvation, all the things he'd escaped. He was clean, fed, safe, maintained. She was in hell, and he could do nothing. The hot showers continued, twice weekly, exactly on schedule. The water was always hot. The soap was always available. The towels were always clean. It was unbearable. Not because it was cruel, because it wasn't. By October 1943, Camp Hereford's labour programme was in full operation. Italian POWs, now technically co-belligerents, though the practical distinction was minimal, were contracted out to local farms and businesses. Cotton harvest mostly, but also construction, roadwork and maintenance. They were paid 80 cents per day, in scrip, exchangeable for items at the camp canteen. Cigarettes, candy, toiletries, writing paper. Bellini was assigned to a cotton farm owned by a man named Earl Harrison, 64 years old, third-generation Texas farmer. His sons were overseas, one in the Pacific, one in Italy. Irony wasn't lost on him. Harrison treated the POW workers with neither kindness nor cruelty, just efficiency. You work hard, we get along fine. You slack off, I report you to the camp. Simple. The work was brutal. Texas heat in September-October could hit 95 degrees. Cotton plants cut your hands. The bags weighed 60 pounds when full. You dragged them to the weighing station, dumped them, went back for more. 8 hours daily. But there were water breaks. Every 2 hours. Cold water from a truck with an ice chest. As much as you wanted. Unlimited. Bellini drank until his stomach hurt. Every break. Every time. Because some part of him still didn't believe the water would keep coming. Harrison noticed. "Son, you drink like that, you're going to piss yourself in the field," the interpreter translated. Bellini nodded. Drank anyway. Harrison shook his head. "Suit yourself." But here's what Harrison didn't understand. Bellini wasn't thirsty, not physically. He was compensating. Making up for months of deprivation. Filling a deficit that wasn't in his stomach, but in his soul. You can't make up for trauma with water, but you can try. In November 1943, Mail Call produced one letter for Bellini, from Sofia's mother, Maria. "Caro Marco, Sofia is alive. We are in Salerno. The Americans control the city now. There is fighting north of here, but we are safe. The cafe is destroyed. Everything is destroyed, but we are alive. Sofia asked me to tell you. She waits, she prays, she dreams of your wedding. The Americans who occupy Salerno are mostly polite. They give us food sometimes. Canned meat, chocolate, coffee. We survive. Come home when you can. Maria." Bellini read the letter 17 times. Memorized it. Kept it folded in his shirt pocket, over his heart. Sofia was alive, in American-occupied territory, being given food by American soldiers. The symmetry was obscene. He was in Texas, being fed and washed by Americans. She was in Salerno, being fed by Americans. Both of them maintained by the same logistical system that had destroyed their lives. That night, after his shower, Thursday exactly on schedule, hot water exactly as promised, he stood under the spray and cried for the first time since the first week. Not from relief, from rage. Impotent, directionless rage at a universe that made survival a gift from your enemy. The war in Europe ended May 8, 1945. Italy had been co-belligerent since September 1943. But the repatriation of Italian POWs from American camps didn't begin until late 1945 and proceeded slowly. Shipping was needed for demobilization, for occupation forces, for refugees. The prisoners waited, months, then a year, then longer. They worked, farmed, maintained themselves. Some learned English, others took classes. The camp offered education programs, taught by volunteers from nearby towns, math, history, literature. Bellini took a vocational course in modern plumbing techniques, American methods, American materials, PVC pipes, improved valve designs, water heaters with thermostatic controls. He learned that American residential buildings had hot water as standard, that this wasn't luxury, this was baseline, that workers in American cities expected to shower daily, with hot water, unlimited, and would complain if the temperature dropped. This information didn't make him angry anymore, just tired. The rage had burned out. What remained was understanding, empty, bitter, but clear. He was repatriated in March 1946, nearly 3 years after capture. He'd gained 43 pounds. His teeth had been repaired. His tuberculosis, diagnosed and treated at Camp Hereford, was gone. He was healthier than he'd ever been. The ship docked at Napoli. The city was rubble. The port was damaged but functional. He walked through streets he'd known since childhood and recognized nothing. Sofia and her mother met him at a displaced persons checkpoint. Sofia looked old, thin. Her hair was grey at the temples, though she was only 27. They embraced. She felt like bones. "You're so healthy," she whispered. "So big. I forgot what healthy looked like." He wanted to tell her about the showers, the hot water, the soap, the weekly laundry. The American corporal who'd been bored by the routine of processing prisoners. He said nothing, just held her, felt her ribs through her dress. Bellini rebuilt his father's plumbing business. Napoli was being reconstructed. Buildings needed water, sewer systems, modern infrastructure funded by American Marshall Plan money. He worked hard, grew the business, hired employees. By 1952, he employed 17 men and held contracts for major construction projects. He specialized in hot water systems, installed modern water heaters in apartment buildings, commercial facilities, schools. He became known for reliability and precision. He never told clients about Texas, about Camp Hereford, about crying under hot showers because his body had forgotten what maintenance felt like. But everyone who worked for him noticed. He was obsessive about hot water, insisted on oversized water heaters, redundant systems, backup heating elements. He would test every installation personally, running the hot water for 15 minutes straight, timing it with his watch. "Boss, it works fine," his foreman would say. "You don't need to test everyone." "Test it," he'd reply. "All of them, every time." They thought he was eccentric, perfectionist. They didn't understand. He was ensuring that no one in his city would ever stand naked and afraid, wondering if the water would run out or turn to gas. It was the only control he had, the only way to process the things that couldn't be spoken. Marco and Sofia married in August 1946. Small ceremony. Her family's cafe was still ruins, so they held the reception in a borrowed restaurant. 50 guests, mostly family and a few friends who'd survived. The restaurant's kitchen had limited capacity. The food was simple: pasta, some meat, wine, bread. Enough. Not abundant, just enough. During the reception, the hot water in the restaurant's restroom ran out. The owner apologized. "The heater is small. Too many people washing hands. I'm sorry." Marco went into the basement, fixed the water heater, adjusted the temperature, got it running again within 20 minutes. When he returned to the reception, Sofia was waiting. "You disappeared on our wedding day to fix plumbing." "The water was cold. I fixed it." She looked at him. Really looked. Saw something in his eyes. The camp in Texas, they had hot water. It wasn't a question. He nodded. "Tell me someday," she said. "When you can." He never did. Not fully. But 30 years later, when their daughter, also named Maria, asked him about the war, he told her one thing. "The Americans defeated us with hot water, not bombs, not bullets, hot water. They gave us showers and made us remember we were human. That was more devastating than any weapon." Maria didn't understand. How could she? She'd grown up in a rebuilt Italy with hot water and Marshall Plan prosperity and the memory of war slowly fading into history. But she remembered the statement, wrote it down. Years later, researching her father's life after his death, she found the discharge papers from Camp Hereford, found the medical records, found the letter to Sofia that never arrived. She published a small book about Italian POWs in American camps. It sold modestly, a few thousand copies. Most readers focused on the food, the labor programs, the eventual repatriation. But some, a very specific few, understood what the book was really about. The psychological devastation of basic maintenance, the way kindness can be more disorienting than cruelty. The impossible weight of surviving when you're being taken care of by the people who destroyed your world. Marco Bellini died in 1987. Heart attack. Quick. He was 70 years old. Sofia found him in the bathroom of their apartment. He'd just showered. The water was still running. Hot water from the oversized heater he'd installed personally in 1962. Steam filled the room. He was clean, hair wet, smelling of soap. American-style soap, the industrial kind he'd always preferred. Wrapped in a towel. Sofia turned off the water, let it drain. The steam cleared slowly. She stood there, looking at her husband's body, and thought about something he'd said once, late at night, after too much wine. "In the camp, I learned that civilization isn't culture or art or philosophy. It's hot water on demand. Everything else is decoration." She hadn't understood then. Not really. How could she? She'd never been imprisoned, never had her humanity reduced to a question of whether the water would flow. But standing in that bathroom, watching the last of the steam disappear, she understood something. He'd spent 41 years making sure the water never stopped, building systems, installing heaters, testing every installation, not for money, Not for pride, for proof. Evidence that the world could be maintained, that infrastructure could be trusted, that you could turn a valve and receive hot water and not have to wonder if it was a trick. She called their daughter, made the arrangements. The funeral was well attended. Marco had been respected, successful, known for quality work. At the wake, one of his old employees, a man named Dino, who'd worked for Marco since the 1950s, told Sophia, "Your husband once told me something strange. We were installing a water heater in a school, and I was complaining about the specifications. Too expensive, I said. Oversized for the need. And he grabbed my arm, the only time he ever got physical with me, and said, 'Children should never have cold water. Never. Build it right or don't build it at all.'" Sophia nodded, said nothing. What could she say? That her husband had been broken by hot water in Texas? That he'd spent 4 decades trying to ensure no one else would experience the cognitive dissonance of being maintained by their enemy? You can't explain trauma to people who've never felt it. You can only build systems that prevent it from recurring. The records from Camp Hereford are stored in the National Archives at College Park, Maryland. Box after box of documentation, medical reports, work schedules, disciplinary actions, census data, letters censored and filed. Bellini's file contains initial medical screening, malnutrition, parasites, dermatological conditions, treatment records, progressive improvement work evaluations, satisfactory performance, skilled worker, disciplinary record, none repatriation date, March 14, 1946. Final weight 174 pounds, captured weight 131 pounds. There's also a photograph, standard issue. Every prisoner was photographed upon arrival and before repatriation. The arrival photo shows a man who looks 60, gaunt, hollow, dead eyes, the kind of face that's seen too much and expects worse. The repatriation photo shows a man who looks 30, healthy, clean, alert, almost unrecognizable as the same person. The transformation is documented, quantified, filed. But what's not in the file is the cost. The psychological price of being healed by your enemy, of having your body maintained while your spirit remains broken, of learning that the nation you fought could afford to be kind and chose to be, and that this kindness was more devastating than any cruelty. After the war, stories circulated in Italy about American POW camps. Most were positive. Talk of abundant food, fair treatment, opportunities for education and work. Some veterans spoke openly about their time in America. Others remained silent. The Italian government, rebuilding its relationship with America as a NATO ally and Marshall Plan recipient, had no interest in highlighting the disparity between American treatment of prisoners and Italian treatment of civilians. So the stories remained personal. Family anecdotes, dinner table conversations. Nothing systematic. Nothing that challenged the emerging narrative of joint Allied Italian cooperation against fascism. But among plumbers in Napoli, there was a legend about Marco Bellini, that he'd learned American techniques in Texas, that he'd been a prisoner of war but returned with knowledge, that his obsession with hot water systems came from some experience no one fully understood. The younger plumbers thought it was professional pride, craftsmanship, the old-school dedication to quality. The older ones, the veterans, the men who'd fought and survived, knew better. They recognized the signs, the hypervigilance about systems, the need to control infrastructure, the way he'd test installations long past the point of verification. These were the behaviors of a man whose trust in basic reality had been shattered and painstakingly rebuilt, valve by valve, pipe by pipe, installation by installation. The German POWs at Camp Hereford had a different response to the same treatment. Excerpt from Intelligence Report, December 1943. German officer POWs maintain rigid discipline and ideological commitment despite extended captivity and exposure to American living standards. Hauptmann Brenner continues to lead group exercises and education sessions, emphasizing National Socialist principles. Notable: German POWs express less emotional response to hygiene provisions than Italian POWs. When questioned, Hauptmann Schaefer stated, "We understand this is psychological warfare. The Americans attempt to soften us with comfort. We remain unmoved." Assessment. German military culture emphasizes hardness and discipline. Italian military culture appears more pragmatic and less ideologically rigid. This creates differential response to captivity conditions. But this was intelligence analysis, not psychology. What the analysts missed: the Germans were just as broken. They just broke differently. Brenner wrote in his diary, discovered after his death in 1982, donated to German military archives. June 1944. I maintain discipline. I lead exercises. I teach the men to resist American softness. But at night, after the showers, I lie in my bunk and think, what if they're right? Not about ideology, about systems, about the difference between propaganda and reality. We told ourselves Americans were weak, mongrel, incapable of sustained warfare. And yet they feed us better than our own people, house us in heated barracks, provide medical care that exceeds what German civilians receive. This is not weakness. This is power so vast it can afford kindness. I fear we have fought the wrong enemy. Or rather, we fought an enemy we couldn't defeat because we never understood what we were fighting. The diary was never published. Too ambiguous for Cold War Germany, where the Wehrmacht was being rehabilitated as just soldiers, distinct from the Nazi regime. A diary questioning the fundamental assumptions of the war didn't fit the narrative, but it exists, filed, preserved. Evidence that the showers broke everyone, regardless of nationality. The Germans just refused to cry. The cost of maintaining Axis POWs in American camps, 1942-1946, $2.1 billion. Adjusted for inflation, approximately $37 billion in 2024 dollars. This included food, 3,200 calories daily per prisoner, actual delivered average, housing, winterized barracks, heated, screened, medical care, full treatment, including dental, tuberculosis, surgery, clothing, regular exchange, industrial laundry, sanitation, hot water twice weekly minimum, chemical treatment, recreation, sports equipment, education programs, religious services, labor payment, 80 cents daily in scrip. The per-prisoner cost was higher than the per-soldier cost for American depot troops, because prisoners required guards, additional security, and Geneva Convention compliance documentation. The American military could have reduced costs, could have provided minimal rations, cold water, less frequent clothing exchange. The Geneva Convention set minimums, not maximums. But the American approach wasn't minimum compliance. It was standard institutional process. The same system that maintained American soldiers was applied to prisoners, not out of kindness, out of bureaucratic efficiency. It was cheaper to feed everyone the same rations than to maintain separate supply chains. Simpler to run the laundry on schedule than to track individual exchange dates. More efficient to provide hot water than to monitor cold water systems and treat the resulting health problems. The humanity was a byproduct of logistics. The psychological warfare was accidental, but to the prisoners, it felt intentional, designed, weaponized. Because how do you process kindness from an enemy? How do you maintain hate for a nation that feeds you better than your own government? How do you sustain ideology when reality contradicts every premise? You can't. So you break, or you build defenses, or you spend 40 years installing hot water heaters, trying to create a world where the question never arises again. 3 weeks before he died, Marco Bellini accepted a contract to install a water system in a new school in Napoli's rebuilt Quartieri Spagnoli, the same neighborhood where he'd grown up, where buildings had been destroyed and reconstructed, where his father's plumbing shop had once stood. The school wanted a modern system, hot water for bathrooms and showers. The physical education department required shower facilities for 200 students. Bellini designed the system personally: oversized boilers, redundant heating elements, pressure regulation, temperature mixing valves to prevent scalding. His project manager questioned the specifications. "Marco, this is expensive. The contract allows for simpler installation." Build it to specification, Bellini said. All of it. The school board might reject the cost overruns. Then I'll pay the difference myself. Build it. They built it. The system was installed in January 1987. Bellini tested it personally, ran all 20 showerheads simultaneously for 30 minutes. The water stayed hot. The pressure remained constant. The temperature held steady. He stood in that shower room, empty, new, smelling of concrete and fresh paint, and watched the steam rise from 20 showerheads delivering hot water exactly as designed. He was 70 years old. His heart was failing, though he didn't know it yet. He'd built hundreds of systems across Napoli, installed thousands of water heaters, maintained infrastructure for 41 years. This was the last one, though he didn't know that either. He turned off the showers one by one, checked each valve, inspected each drain. Everything functioned perfectly. Good, he said quietly to the empty room. The children will have hot water. 3 weeks later, he was dead. Sophia lived another 15 years. She died in 2002, age 83. The apartment in Napoli went to their daughter Maria. Maria sold most of the furniture, kept a few items, personal things. But when she went to drain and disconnect the oversized water heater her father had installed in 1962, she found something. Taped to the back of the heater, where no one would see it unless they were removing the unit completely, was a faded photograph. The arrival photo from Camp Hereford. The gaunt, hollow-eyed man who looked 60 at age 26. And a note, written in her father's handwriting. This is who I was when hot water became a question instead of an answer. I spent my life making sure the question never needed to be asked again. If you're reading this, I'm gone. The heater still works. Keep it that way. Maria kept the photograph, included it in her book. But she donated the water heater to a museum, the Museo della Memoria in Napoli, which documents civilian experiences during World War II. It's displayed in a small exhibit about Italian POWs. The placard reads, "Water heater, American manufacture, 1962, installed by Marco Bellini, former POW at Camp Hereford, Texas. Symbolic of post-war reconstruction and Marshall Plan modernization." The placard misses the point entirely. This wasn't about reconstruction or modernization. This was about trust, about building systems that wouldn't fail, about ensuring that hot water would keep flowing, because once you've learned it can stop, you never fully believe in it again. The heater hasn't run in years. It's just a museum piece now. Metal and pipes and heating elements that once maintained temperature for a family that survived a war. But sometimes late at night when the museum is closed, maintenance workers swear they can hear water running through the pipes. They check. Find nothing. The exhibit is dry, disconnected, just an artifact. But the sound persists. Phantom pressure in dead pipes. The ghost of a system that once functioned perfectly, built by a man who couldn't trust that functioning would last. Maybe they're imagining it. Maybe museums accumulate echoes. Or maybe some things, infrastructure, trust, the simple certainty that water will flow when you need it, leave traces that outlast their physical form. Either way, the water heater remains. Silent now. Permanent. A monument to a man who learned in Texas that hot water could break you worse than any bullet and spent his life trying to make sure no one else had to learn the same lesson.